Well, I'm back with Hope, and we are going to have a quick chat because this was something that she was like, "Oh, I know so much about this," and I was like, "We have to talk about this conversation because I feel like it comes up a lot, and I feel like I'm always encouraging women. You know what? If you're not happy with your doctor, go find someone else." So let's dive in, and Hope, I'm gonna let you take it away. We're going to talk about how women are disproportionately affected by medical gaslighting.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's such an important topic. And I've always known this was true because I get a lot of clients that come to me that, they've been to all the doctors. And I mean, the stories in FDNP,
Yeah.
like we see it all the time. They've
We
been to many
do. They've been
doctors.
to everyone and we're kind of
hmm
their last resort. Like, please help
Exactly.
me.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know Dr. Mark Hyman, but
Mhm.
he's a functional med doctor and a medical doctor. And he makes this comment sometimes. I've heard it so many years ago when he started saying it. I'm like, now I get it. He would say he's a resort doc. He's the resort doctor because he's their last resort. Like people
Yeah.
are coming to him, like, just figure it out, like figure out what it is. And the thing is, they're going to all the doctors, they're doing all these labs or whatever. And the doctors are either saying they're quote totally fine because their labs look normal. They're saying, I've had women who the doctor says we just need to lose weight. Like that's literally their solution is just lose weight, which me and you both know the weight is a symptom. It's not really the problem.
Yes.
They tell women, I've had quite a few clients where they're like, oh, it's just anxiety. Like, not helpful at all. And so I think there was an article, I want to say it was last year, maybe the year before, that the New York Times put out. I think it was the New York Times. And it was this whole article about this topic and about, they did this study, this reporter did this study, and it was literally the percentage of like how many people are gaslit by doctors, and it's women. It's
Yeah.
women. It's not men, it's women. And now granted, yes, I'm not saying it never happens to men. Sure, it could happen to men. It's so disproportional. And there's a few reasons. Women are more in tune with their bodies, so we
Mhm.
feel things differently and we feel things are off. And I also feel like we can tune into our intuition a little bit better. And so we kind of tuning into our intuition and we're like, okay, something is off, something doesn't feel right. And but we may not look sick on the outside, right? And I think that's the other piece to it, especially thinking about just specifically, I don't know what just came up, but thinking about autoimmune diseases. And I work with a lot of women who have autoimmune diseases, and they may not look sick on the outside, but they feel terrible on the inside.
Yeah.
And I think that causes doctors to kind of just brush them off, right? Well, you don't look sick, right? They're not overweight. They don't have, they don't necessarily have anything going on their skin. And you're not breaking on hives, so you must be fine, right? Like, so I feel like there's a whole piece of this too. It's like, well, you either don't quote look sick, or they've done all the basic labs where their blood pressure's fine and their blood sugar's fine and all this. Well, you look fine, and that's like the extent of the lab work that they've done.
Or can we talk about medication, right?
Mm,
Or they just want to, oh, well, here you have high blood pressure, so take this. Or, oh, you have anxiety, oh, we'll take this. And it's like, but
totally.
those are symptoms.
Yep.
Like, I want to really, everyone listening to understand like anxiety and high blood pressure, like those are symptoms
Right.
of something else. There's
Something
root
else.
causes for those. And I just wish in the medical world they'd say, oh, well, there are things you can do to actually improve
Right.
all of that.
Right.
And I think anxiety has become such a blanketed statement. And I'm not discounting that it's a real
Yeah.
emotion we have, a
Yeah.
real feeling.
Yeah.
I've had it. I've dealt with it. I dealt with
Yeah.
mold, right? And man, mold will cause massive anxiety. It's not fun. But it just gets brushed off like, oh, well,
Right.
it's just anxiety here. You can take this, it'll calm your nervous system. And it's like,
Exactly.
eh.
That's
But
exactly it.
what are all the other symptoms that,
Right.
oh my God, you look at all the fine print of all the pharmaceuticals. And again, I also want to say too, and I know you agree with me, that there is a time and a place for
Yes.
pharmaceuticals. There
Yes,
really,
for
truly
sure.
is.
For sure.
But I mean, I don't know what a percentage is. Have you looked into like, what's the percentage of prescriptions that are passed out that are really just, they're for a Band-Aid solution.
Right.
They're not fixing anything.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Well, and if you've ever looked at the side effects of things, I know for anti-anxiety medication, literally the side effect is anxiety. Like,
Yeah.
how is that a side effect of the thing that you're trying to prevent? Like, that makes no sense to me.
No,
And
it's not.
it's, I think that's the other thing too, is it's, well, then you get into that whole like wormhole thing where it's like, well, now I'm taking medication for this, but then I have this side effect. So I'm going to take medication for this side effect. And it's like this chain reaction of now I'm on 5 different medications, but 4 of them are just managing side effects of this one medication. And so, like you said, all of these are just blanket or band-aids to cover up symptoms. We're not getting to the root of the problem. And I do want to say this too. I'm not like saying any of this to bash doctors or whatever. Doctors are important and doctors are very smart and very educated, but they are trained to manage symptoms. They are trained in symptoms, medication, surgery. That's the Western model of the Western medical model, right?
Yep.
It's symptoms, it's medication, it's surgery. There's no getting to the root cause. They're just not trained. They're not trained that way. So, I think at some level, it's like, well, it's to no fault of their own because that's how they were trained. But then it's like, okay, well, then let's change the model. Let's change the paradigm. Yeah.
Yeah. They're starting to. I mean,
yeah.
There is, I know in the medical, at least around here, I've seen some where they're starting to do kind of a functional, it's not like functional medicine doctor, like you think of functional medicine doctor, but they're trying to, I think, to compete, I suspect because the medical world is losing quite a few of their good doctors
People are figuring it out.
Jumping and going and getting their actual functional medicine training. But this is always the interesting thing to me is, and I'm sure you've taught, I know a lot of functional med doctors and they're great. I love them. Right. But every single one of them that I know and have ever had a conversation with, they became a functional medicine doctor because they had to go to a functional medicine doctor or someone outside of the actual medical system to help heal their body.
Right.
And then they were like, oh, wait a minute, I can't even heal myself. And I'm a medical doctor.
Totally.
Then I need to be changing what I'm doing for my patients.
Right.
So I just think that's, I don't know. I've kind of wanted to say that for a really long time, you guys. So there you have it. I've seen it. I've talked to a lot of functional medicine doctors. I know a lot of them and they're amazing. Right. But it's so, I don't know. It's just so interesting to me that, I don't know. It's go back to the money, right? And I talked to it'd be a couple episodes ago, Robert, when he was on and we were talking about gut health, and he is again a doctor, became a functional medicine doctor, and he was saying, is the first one I've heard say that, but it makes sense. He's like, even more than big pharma, he's like, it's insurance, actually insurance 100%. That drives so much of it. And I was like, oh, you're actually right. Because when I have conversations with people, it's like, just trying to say, hey, you can go to your physician and order this blood work, because I'll always offer that to my clients, and see if insurance will cover it. Right. And they usually will come back with like 30% of them. Right. And I'm like, okay, so then I just order and we pay out of pocket, and it's so easy. And it's like, you got to pay out of pocket, but you know what? Blood labs, when you actually pay them out of pocket, they're not that expensive, you guys. Right. It's just a racket how much they charge for them. There's the occasional lab that is more pricey for sure, but I can run like a whole wellness panel for not too much, and it's just mind-boggling.
It's giving you and the labs that you're ordering, that we're ordering, give so much more data than like the general labs that the doctors are ordering. And you're right, it is about the money. And I have that conversation a lot too, is, I'm sure calls that you have it, a lot of people, their first question is like, oh, would you take insurance? Like, well, insurance, unfortunately,
we can't.
Insurance says it doesn't cover this. And it's unfortunate the way that it's set up that, I guess kind of going back to what you're saying, it's more about the bottom line than like, let's get people well. Because actually I was listening to, I think it was a podcast the other day. And so they were talking about cancer, and the guy was like asking, when do you think there's going to be a cure for cancer? And he's like, well, the money, and I've heard this before too, but he said in this whole conversation, it's like the money's in the treatment, it's not in the cure. So he's like, what if we already had a cure for cancer and it's never going to come out? It's one of those things where it's like the money is in the treatment and the symptoms and the meds. It's in treating all these symptoms. It's not in getting to the root cause. So unfortunately, these labs that we do that give so much more data and can really help uncover so many things, that it's just kind of, I think, an unfortunate piece of how the system is set up. But I think too, understanding how much more valuable these labs really are. I mean,
Well, absolutely. And it comes down to my question to people always is, and I know obviously not everybody is financially in a position to be able to afford out of pocket. It does get pricey.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if there's any way you can make it work, because if you don't have your health, then, you know, life is just harder, right? And it's kind of a trickle effect. And, you know, having, like I said, dealt with mold, I mean, life doesn't get a lot worse than dealing with toxic mold. Like, you know, it kicks down.
Yeah.
And, you know, and just, it's just, I don't know. It's so fascinating to me how we can heal the body with the right information. I mean, that's the biggest thing, right? Getting the right information. And it's sad that these labs that you and I order for clients are not covered by insurance, you know, but we're here to actually get to root causes and help clients actually get better versus, and not that doctors don't want their clients to get better. A lot of them do, but it's the whole model. The whole medical model, they don't even know about half the labs that you and I can order. We've been trained to do and look at and all that. So it's, I don't know, it's always, I could go on some deep,
no,
deep
for sure. I'm
here.
the same way. I'm the same way. Well, and it just, I don't know. I think the other piece too is, well, it's like, you know, we talk about how doctors are trained. And, you know, I try to explain this to people sometimes too, where, and again, I don't want to speak in generalities because I know some doctors are double, triple board certified and they've done extra things.
Yeah. There's some that are really good. There some that are really good.
Yes. But most doctors are in, like, let's just say in like just traditional medical school. Like they're taking, like, I think it's like less than 18 hours of nutrition. Like that's
it. I've heard it's an hour.
Yeah.
1 hour.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So when I'm thinking like, okay, you know, why aren't doctors giving diet and lifestyle? Like they literally weren't trained. They weren't taught anything about it. So it's like, it's outrageous to me thinking like, because even some simple things could be so transformational for people without doing anything else. But like, let's talk about your lifestyle and your diet. Like, let's just look at those and nothing else.
Right. And that's where we start with clients, because you can't, and I've said this before on a recent episode, I'm like, you cannot out supplement or out eat crappy sleep. Like you just can't, you know? And so, and I know some people, like, sometimes we need to do some things initially to help you get sleeping, but it's looking at all the pieces together. And not just trying to just supplement. And and I always look at supplements as like, with anything, right? It's like, what's the purpose? And, you know, it's not necessarily about taking them long-term. It's like they're therapeutic for one reason or another while we're working to rebalance something else or whatever it might be.
And I think that's a good point to bring up, because I think a lot of times people think, so when I have calls with ladies, as I really just work with women, they think that, oh, I'm gonna have to take like, you know, $500 worth of supplements every month forever. Like, no, like this isn't forever. Like that's not the point. It's to like dope you up with a bunch of supplements for the rest of your life. Like you're saying, there's a specific that
doesn't work either.
No, it doesn't. There's a specific purpose for a specific period of time, and it's not like forever. So yeah, I think that's an important distinction too, understanding like what the protocol looks like, and it's just not forever. This is just part of like the healing protocol.
Yeah. But it is just so sad how many women, I mean, I hear from so many, they're like, my doctor says my labs look fine. I mean, I can't tell you I got mine back the other day and my doctor's like, oh, your labs look fine. And I look and so I put them into my software that I look for things, and just so I don't have to convert every single one to functional ranges. And I'm like, well, they're okay, but there's some things on here that I'm glad I know about, just so I can make sure that they're not gonna swing one way or the other. Like my thyroid markers, or like I've had to really watch my iron, because mold really depletes iron. And my iron was fine again, but my ferritin is still like pretty darn low. And I'm like,
Whoa.
okay, what, like, this has just been a
Right.
long ongoing thing. But
Process,
again,
yeah.
and I have I look at her because she's a midwife as well. She's much more holistic, but even from her perspective, she looks at it and is like, you know, it looks fine. There's nothing on here that tells me that you need to do anything. And I'm like, I look at it and I'm like, oh no, I got lots of action items
Yeah.
and things that I know I can
Yeah.
do to improve upon, because
Right.
I want to be working now for optimal health. So as
Sure.
I'm getting older, right,
Right.
that we can work to prevent things, especially knowing my health history, right? So
Yeah,
that's what we
right.
do with our clients. It's looking at health history, because I can't tell you, and I'm sure you do the same thing. When you sit down and talk with a client, like how much stuff starts to come up
Yep.
from the past, and you're like, oh wow, that ding ding ding, right?
Yep.
And just because we spend so much more time
Yep.
talking with clients,
Right.
the doctors don't even have that ability
Yeah,
because
right.
they're bound by insurance, right?
Exactly.
But then
Exactly.
you actually start to connect these dots
Mhm.
that otherwise have been getting missed for who knows how long. And it's like, huh, yeah, maybe you grew up in a moldy house at one point and you've got mold, or again,
Right.
whatever. There's so many
Right.
things. That's just something
Yeah.
that I always kind of pull out because
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
something that I've dealt with.
Yeah.
And I've not obviously all my clients, but some of them we find mold, and I'm like, yeah, that's why you're not getting better, because it's just going to keep you sick until you get rid of it.
Get rid of it. Right.
Yeah.
Totally. Well, and I think you brought up a good point about the lab ranges, because I think that's the other piece too, is like comparing like the medical lab ranges to the functional lab ranges, where a lot of the medical lab ranges, it's literally like, well, you're not dead, so
So you're great.
okay.
You must, there's no reason you feel like crap.
Exactly. It's so when you look at functional ranges, like, no, we're looking for optimal health. I had a guest on my podcast not too long ago, and he was talking about that. Like, he has a book and he was talking about the difference between health and vitality. And like literally the definition of health, if you look it up in the dictionary, it's absence of disease. Like, why is that what we're shooting for? Just to not be sick. Like when you're looking at vitality, it's like, this is like, we're talking about optimal health. Like, no, this is.
So we should start using the word vitality then.
Exactly. 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 That's exactly it. Like, I don't want to look at the medical range where I'm like, well, okay, I'm not dead, so I guess I'm okay. Like, let's look to optimal health and look at vitality. Like that's what we want to aim for.
Because in all honesty, your thyroid markers don't have to be that off for you to feel like crap.
Totally.
Like that's the truth. And
so true.
Doctors will look at it and be like, well, you're within range, you feel fine.
Yep, you're fine.
And then you or I look at it and we're like, that among who knows what else comes up. And we're like, yeah, I'm starting to see why you don't feel so good. Right. And I always feel like I love blood labs just because it's inexpensive, essentially, and it's easy to retest things. So for me, I like, hey, let's run a market. Let's see, is your cholesterol like, how are things moving in the right direction? But then of course, like the stool tests and all the other, tests that we do are so informative. They really show so much insight. And then of course we correlate it with the symptoms, and health history and all of that. And it's just so amazing. Like I had this client and she's amazing. And I had put together, I was like, oh, she was having like lung stuff or whatever. And so I was kind of going back over health history and having this conversation. I was like, okay, so when did this start and all that? And she pinpointed like this pneumonia stuff had started, like she was having recurrent ones every single year. And I was like, okay, well, that's lungs. So what got in her lungs when? And so we had pinpointed 10 years ago, she was doing like triathlons. She was super fit, super active. She was doing triathlons and she was swimming in like an open body of water. And I think another swimmer accidentally kind of pushed her under. So she inhaled a bunch of water. And I was like, you have bugs in your lungs. You know what I mean? And it's like, so, it's obviously not a guarantee, but it's like one of those things where I'm like, no one else has ever even thought to like, let's go over all the things. Like you dig it all up and you put it all together and you're like, and I'm like, okay, we've got some junk in the lungs it's been staying there. And so then the slightest of anything, she'd just get really sick again. And I'm like, okay, we got to work to get this junk out of the body, and you have to do it very systematically. You can't just be like, but anyway, it's so fascinating when we're able to do that. So I love this work. It's so fun.
It is. Well, and we know, we, like you said before, we take the time to ask the right questions and dive in deeper the way, most other practitioners and medical professionals don't necessarily do.
Yeah, just because they don't have the time. So,
Yep.
well, Hope, is there any last thing you want to say on this? Because I know you got to get running.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think to sum it up, I think just for people listening, especially women, because I think just because things happen to us so disproportionately, like we talked about, I think just knowing that, like remembering, I think we know, but remembering that we're always our own best advocate. And if something feels off, then it is, no matter what a doctor or whatever practitioner or professional is telling you, to always like lead with your intuition and just to keep looking for answers. And, you don't have to take any one practitioner or professional's opinion as the gospel truth. Like just keep searching if you feel like something is off.
yeah, I love that. Okay, question for you real quick. Have you ever had someone start to work with you and you found nothing to help them?
Never.
I know, me either. Right? So these women that
That's
are
such a good
being
question.
told by their doctors that, oh, you're fine, there's nothing going on. And I'm like, I always can find something, some healing
Always.
potential somewhere.
Totally.
It's
And I've even had
amazing.
clients come to me before. I've had a few, especially here recently, where they don't necessarily have like huge red flags, but they're like, kind of like we were talking about, like, I just want to go more towards that optimal health.
Yeah.
And they didn't really think anything was really wrong. When we look at their labs, I'm like, oh, there's actually lots of things here we could work on. So even when people don't necessarily feel terrible, they can still find ways to,
Improve their health.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Hang on. My video left us.
Oh yeah, I saw that. I was like, is that me?
It
But I
died.
can hear
Okay.
you.
There's my other video.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Okay. So Hope, will you share with everybody where they can reach out to you or learn more about if they're interested at all in working with you or just learning more
Yeah,
about what you're doing?
yeah, for sure. So you can send me a message on Instagram. I'm at the Hope Pedraza, or you can jump into my free Facebook group. It's Live Wholesome and Healthy.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Hope. This has been so
Thank
great.
you, Erica. Thank you.